Corrugated the bugbear laughs at your requests, and he stares you down. He lifts a huge boulder above his head, ready to bring it down upon thee. Roll initiative.
18.
You go first.
Kabaroth, my half-dragon, half-halfling, which makes him a quarter-halfling,
Naturally.
leaps into the air like a freak, bringing down his spiked poison club of Kathaparal.
Roll your attack.
With modifier, that's 27.
That hits. Your club comes sailing down, aimed right at his head. Roll damage.
Okay, that's this one and that one, I think. Okay. 3.
As the club comes down, your arthritis kicks in, and you limply hold it with one hand as it bounces off his skull, and he takes 3 damage.
Hello, I'm Justin.
And I'm Kyle.
And we are the Mirror Twins, and today we're talking about something that's near and dear to this man's heart. Besides Transformers, and besides games, it's a Transformer game. You and your wife are huge fans of board games.
Like a lot of people, it was Catan.
It's the gateway board game.
And then it just spiraled out of control from there.
Your wife is a little obsessed. What you are to Transformers, she is to board
games, yes. Kickstarter, we get a lot of games off Kickstarter, and I force you to play a lot of them.
So this video, I'm imagining twofold. The first half is going to be RPGs. If you're new to RPGs, what is an RPG? Is an RPG for me? What does it even stand for? Do I like them? If you are already familiar with what RPGs are and how they play, then skip to the timestamp right there. We'll go into the second half of the video, which is a review of a new RPG. Is it just called Transformers?
Transformers role-playing game by Renegade Games.
Okay.
They've gotten a Hasbro license, and they've done G.I. Joe, My Little Pony,
Power Rangers. So all the stuff we talk about and like. And you can jump straight into the Transformers review and what we think of it. So, RPGs. What are they? Should I play it? What does it even stand for?
Okay, let's start with...
really progressive gherkins?
No, it's not really progressive. I didn't know where you were going with that. It's like, our game's progressive. No, it's a role-playing game.
Role-playing RPG.
RPG, role-playing game. A role-playing game is a cooperative storytelling game. One person is going to be the lead storyteller, the game master, or for Dungeons & Dragons specifically, it's the DM, the dungeon master. They know the whole story. They lead the other players through the story, and they tell this adventure together. They're trying to tell a memorable, fun story. The other players, they're presented the story in scenes by the game master, the GM, and the other players who are playing specific characters will interact in that scene, and they get to say what they're going to do, and they react in character. So it's roll, R-O-L-E, and then you R-O-L-L, some dice to see what happens.
Okay. All right, little pun, little play on words there. Unintentionally.
Unintentionally, because they're all...
So I'm going to be the audience right now. Sounds intriguing, but I'm no actor.
They say it like that.
I am not a thespian. Am I dramatic?
You are playing a character. The GM is going to help everybody else create a character because your character has to fit in whatever their story is going to do. You're going to be a fantasy character, you know, a fighter or an archer or a magician or something like that. You're going to play as that character. It's a named character. It doesn't represent you. You're representing the character. The GM would say something like, you found a overturned wagon and it's abandoned. It looks like it's been looted. What do you do? And you say what your character would do.
I think that's the intimidating thing for people who have never played role-playing games. It's that, what do you do? Whereas most board games, the rules are clearly defined. The goal is clearly defined, but a role-playing game, you have to figure out the goal, or the goal is very loose or very broad. Some people get intimidated, I think, by the what do you do? It's like, what should I do? There's nothing in the rule book. But that's where I think the delineation between people who really like role-playing games and regular rule-abiding board games is. And I'm not saying there's two factions that are warring. They often overlap. But the role-playing aspect of it is that making it up. It's like, well, I check around the wagon, or I search for survivors, or I use my special sight to see if there's been a murder and look for blood or something like that. There are rules. I've heard this several times by some of our friends who have played with us for the first time. Like, well, if there's no rules, how do you play? It's like, There are rules. There are rules. The rules are what can your character do? What can you do in this situation? You can't say, oh, I melt into vapor and disappear. Like, no, your character can't do that.
Right.
So there's where the rules come in.
Yeah, you're playing a character. The GM decides what you can and can't do. Like, if you say, I want to leap over the wagon, well, you're not strong enough to do that, or whatever.
I want to pick up the wagon and throw it in the river.
Yeah, that's just people trying to troll the whole game. The GM walks you through the scenarios. If you have a good GM, it shouldn't be intimidating because it's kind of logical. It's like, well, if you're a wizard and you're very old and you have a big stick and you can do magic, well, what would a wizard who has those qualities
not backflips
do? Yeah, he wouldn't run up and say, hey, y'all, I found a wagon. That's not what a wizard would do. You just act in character. It's pretend. It's what kids did when they were little, except a lot of fun dice you can roll and see what happens.
That's where the dice rolling comes in, is to decide if you're successful on certain things. And the game master is the deciding factor of when you have to roll and when you don't.
Right.
So, for instance, you don't roll, it's like, I pick up a stick. You don't roll for that.
No.
But maybe there's something tricky about the stick, and the game master says, roll for dexterity to find out if you
might be a
pick
trap
up the
or whatever.
stick. So a lot of the onus is on the shoulders of the game master.
Yes, that's going to be hopefully the most experienced player, but in our game, it was just the one who didn't mind spending hours and hours and hours reading the rules and watching videos online.
The other thing I want to mention about how role-playing games are different from regular board games is that it's not you versus the game. It's not you versus the game master. It is you guys collaboratively trying to play through the story.
Yeah, it's a cooperative storytelling game.
Yeah.
And the game master knows the story and tries to take the characters logically through it. They have to make changes based on what the characters do.
So the fun part for the players, I think, is obvious. It's figuring out the adventure and coming up with creative ways of solving the puzzles, getting to the goal, beating the orc, crossing the bridge, whatever it may be. What is the fun part of being the game master? Just being a control freak?
No. No, it's taking them through the story. Sometimes they'll do something that you either didn't plan for or that is going to be super dangerous for them. Like, that they shouldn't do that now, and you have to kind of not railroad them, but try to point them in the right direction. The whole goal is to have fun. That's the most important thing, is that everybody has a good time.
So you can break the rules if it gets too much in the weeds or...
Yeah. It says that in the game. It's like the rules are only there to facilitate the story. Story takes precedence. You're telling a story with your friends.
What type of people would not like an RPG?
People who need probably more grounded. They don't want the creative aspect. They want to do more like puzzle solving.
They want a specific goal and they want to win.
If you just want to win, then you're probably not going to enjoy a role-playing game.
Because there's no winning. It's just
you get to the
getting
end.
to the end of the chapter.
Yeah, it's like a book.
Unlike a book where everything's predetermined by the author, you and the characters are the author together.
Right.
So you're figuring it out. Yes, the GM has the end point in mind, and they have plot points.
Right.
But the players might surprise you and go around this plot point or turn it into a new one.
Right. The way it was described, you're getting to the same place. You're still getting to the end. You know what the end is, but it's how you get there. It's a journey.
It's also time intensive.
It is.
Depending on how many people you have, depending on the scenario, depending on the GM, depending on how much your friends like to banter. We're talking like hour, 2, 3 hours minimum to play a chapter.
And if you're new, it takes longer because you have to explain the game. Ideally, everybody would buy this book. Everybody reads it and makes their own character. Half this book is character creation.
And a lot of those rules the players don't actually have to know.
No,
the GM just tells you, okay, roll this.
Right.
Okay, roll this with this modifier. So as a player, it's a lot easier, and there's a lot less stress and prep work.
GM's going to tell you what to do, what to roll, how many dice to roll. As the player, mostly what you have to do is keep up with your special abilities.
Why do people want to play games in the first place? With board games, I feel like the big part is the social aspect of it. You're sitting down with friends and you get to hang out. You get to laugh and joke. And
even with some board games, they're really think heavy. And so you end up playing a whole game in almost complete silence.
What's so different and unique and special and interesting about role-playing games is that the social aspect of the game is completely woven in. In fact, you have to be social or it's not going to play well. It's very interesting because the stereotype is the introverted nerd likes Dungeons & Dragons. Well, it's probably because that type of person is more comfortable being social with people if they're behind this facade, this mask,
they're being
this
someone
character.
else.
Yeah,
They're playing a character.
So it is good in the sense that you practice social behaviors, but in a game type format. So I would argue that role-playing games are more social and more interactive with the other people around you than a regular board game, because like you said, you could just get totally into it and ignore everyone else.
And it's completely cooperative. The GM has to put monsters just to keep it interesting, but they're not trying to beat you.
Yeah, and you're not trying to beat the GM. Your combined goal is to tell a fun story and have a good time.
You want to have a memorable story that everybody has a good time. A good GM is going to read the players, and then if they have to make adjustments on the fly to make everything run smoothly and everybody has a good time.
So now let's move on to Transformers, the role-playing game. This just came out. Kyle's been very, very excited about it. We played Dungeons & Dragons a couple of times with your wife as the GM over Zoom, and that was our first taste for all of us for Dungeons & Dragons. You guys always wanted to try it.
You got the starter kits. They're good if you want to start there.
If you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, how is this different?
It's a little more streamlined and as far as what the players have to do. For instance, you don't have to make as big of a distinction between ranged and melee weapons. A lot of times they use both stats to work, so you can be ranged or melee, or you can do both. Everybody gets ranged weapon and a melee weapon. You don't have to specify. The weapons do damage rather than rolling for damage like in D&D. Let me roll for damage. You're dead.
So there's not a second roll for damage.
There's not a second roll.
But you do roll for your bonuses and your deficits.
Yes. So this uses, it's called the Essence 20 system, which is invented by Renegade Games. It's what the Power Ranger uses. It's what G.I. Joe uses, and what's the up-and-coming My Little Pony that's going to be using the same system. And so you have 4 essences, and that's similar to your stats on D&D, your modifiers. And then there's categories within the 4. Strength, speed, smarts, and social is what they call it. And then there's categories within that.
In D&D, you're typically a fantasy-style character. High fantasy, Tolkien-inspired character. But depending on your group, depending on the GM, you can make it any scenario you want.
You can. The rules are there where you can basically do any type of story. It can be fantasy sci-fi. It can be in the future. You can be on a spaceship.
Steampunk,
whatever. And then you just modify the weapons to fit.
With the Transformers game, it's going to either be played modern, 80s, the future,
on Cybertron.
It can be whatever you want, but what's nice about them being biomechanical machines is that you can fly, you can drive, you can go underwater, you can do all these things that humans can't do. Human-like characters can't.
And you can actually fight in vehicle form too. The other neat thing about this is you can be a character that's only 4 feet tall, or you can be a character that's 30, 40, 50, 100 feet tall.
One of my characters I played actually transformed into a gun.
Yeah.
It was a target master, right? So she was human-sized. And the other thing I liked about it, going from Dungeons & Dragons fantasy style to this, which took place, like, what would you say, modern times? When you did it? There was a lot of questions that were removed just by making it a modern setting. Let me explain what I mean by that. We came up in your scenario to a camera. Well, we all know what a camera is. We know how cameras work. We know their strengths and weaknesses and ways around it. Whereas if you were in Dungeons & Dragons and you're like, a magical seeing orb. Okay, now we have to ask all these questions and test all these things. But just making it modern kind of made it easier in a sense.
It also moved a little quicker.
It moved a little quick because we all understood what a telephone was. We all understood what a gun was. If one of my characters wanted to look at a gun, we all understood what it was. In D&D, it's like, there's this rune stone and there's all these questions about it.
Right.
And all these things.
Like, which character reads runes? Is it a rune you recognize?
Yes.
Because there's all these multiple languages in D&D.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun. It's way more layers.
And it can bog it down.
It can.
If you're with a group that likes that, then more power to you.
Yes.
But if you're with a group that like, let's go, let's tell the story. Just making it in modern times, to me, notched the cool factor up.
It's also neat to be a helicopter.
I could fly. It's like, okay, see ya, guys.
And there's this this really cool thing that you did as your character where you took one of the bad guys back to home base for interrogation.
You didn't plan for that.
No, I didn't plan for that.
The other kind of cool mental thing, so you mentioned characters can be huge, small, they have to disguise, so that's a new aspect to the game because it's in modern times. We understand things better. Another aspect of the game is the ability to transform. That is so cool. I'm not just a guy who can shoot fireballs or turn into a fish on occasion with the right spell conditions. At any point, I can use an action to completely morph my body and have a completely different gameplay style after that. That is so cool. One of our guys was a tank. I mean, just imagine. Just take a second. You're a tank. Endless possibilities. If I was a truck, I could drive into somebody, transform, turn around, and shoot if I had enough actions.
If you had enough actions, yeah.
That combination just opens up these new possibilities and these new combinations and new things you can do and new ways to be creative. Do you need to be a Transformer fan to enjoy this?
No, but it helps with the lore. Fantasy is so broad that people understand what that is with the Lord of the Rings and everything. Transformers, the movies, people understand what that is. No, you don't have to be a Transformers fan.
But if you like mechs, if you like Gundams, if you like anime, I think this could still be your jam.
I think for just what you said, this could be absolutely so super cool because you do get to play kind of two characters. And then there is triple changers in this, which nobody in our group played.
What do you like better about D&D versus this?
This is more straightforward. Just for the rolling aspect, you roll to see if you hit, and that's it. Starter character has 3 or 4 hit points. That's it.
But
D&D,
every hit takes only 1 hit point.
Right.
That's an annoying thing about D&D. Okay, now roll to see if it hits. Now roll to see what your damage is.
In D&D, you do have to roll for damage, and there's a lot more damage. Like starting characters have, 10, 12. I think a wizard has 9, and he's really low. So a stronger character is going to have 15, 20 hit points or something like that. It just takes a while if you only chip away at someone. Whereas this, if you do 2 damage to someone, that could be half their life points.
An annoying part about D&D is that you could have this awesome, cool weapon, but because of a bad roll, and the modifiers are supposed to combat that, because if it's an awesome, cool weapon, it's going to have cool modifiers.
Right, and
but you can still, roll a 2.
Yeah, you could still roll really poorly after doing something really cool. This game kind of streamlines that. 1 hit point is a lot. It's 1 less roll you have to do. It's 1 less thing you have to think about. It's 1 less thing you have to have on your character sheet. This weapon does 1 point of damage. This weapon does 2.
What's another big difference? Talking about weapons.
You requisition your weapons at the beginning of each scenario. So if you had a sword the whole first scenario and you didn't like that, next time you can get a sniper rifle. All right, you find a crossbow.
Sweet! These imps are too hard to hit with a sword. I pick up the crossbow.
Are you sure you want to do that? All your stats are in melee fighting.
I always wanted a ranged weapon, so yes, I pick up the crossbow.
All right, you have a crossbow. Now you just need some bolts.
There's no bolts anywhere?
Well, you can get some in the next town you go to.
Okay, I'll do that. I put the crossbow on my back.
Yeah, you're gonna need a bunch of bolts for that thing from all the missing you're gonna be doing because you're a melee fighter. You can just change your weapons, which I think is so cool.
Now, explain how stats and advantages and stuff work when you change weapons.
Just like in D&D, weapons have a modifier that's associated with them. You have these pips you can add in when you earn a point in one of your 4 essences. It's a dot you circle in. If you have 1 dot, you're going to roll your d20, just like in Dungeons & Dragons, but instead of having the modifier where in D&D you have that +2 or +1 or -1 or 0, whatever, this one you're going to also roll. The first pip is a D2, which is just a coin.
Now that is an extra roll though. So we're talking about how less rolling is better, but in this one, yeah, you don't roll for damage, but you roll for your advantage.
Yeah. All those dice you had to buy, you actually use them. Whereas like Dungeons & Dragons, okay, you need a d20 and then this whole other set that you might use, but probably not. But if you get 2 pips in it, now you're rolling a d4. Your chances of hitting more get higher and so on. And then they also have this thing called specializations. In D&D, I think it's similar to feats. Some DMs don't even like feats because they unbalance the game. Whereas this one, they call them specializations and they work way more smoothly. Under strength, there's athletics, brawn, intimidation, and might. If you write down a specialization specialization like martial arts, then you get to roll specialization, which means if you have multiple pips in there, if you have a D2, a D4, and a D6, you get to roll all of them with your D20. You don't add them up, you take the highest one. And if any one of those, I'm sorry, this is so complicated, if any one of those rolls the highest number on that die, it counts as a crit. And crits work the same as D&D. But they also have upshifts and downshifts. So if you get something with an upshift and the DM decides this, you get to roll more die. And then some specific weapons say you get an upshift on this. You get 2 upshifts. So you get like multiple upshifts. So you might be rolling 3 D6s. You do add them up.
So I'm a D&D player and I'm still not convinced.
If you like awesome giant transforming robots,
who doesn't?
And you want to fly, you want to shoot laser bolts, you don't want to have to keep up with ammunition. That is another thing in this game.
That is so annoying.
Yes.
Like, you're out of arrows.
That doesn't happen that often in D&D, but it's something you have to keep up with. You have to keep up with food, keep up with your rations in D&D.
You have to sleep, right?
You have to sleep, and in this game you don't have to sleep. It's better if you do, because there's a commodity energon, and it gets replenished after 6 hours of rest, but you don't have to. It's not like in D&D, you have to sleep at some point. Otherwise you'll be tired or fatigued or whatever. You get those conditions. 1 energon cube will last you like months.
I didn't realize energon cubes were so caloric.
Oh yes, the energon is energy dense.
It's the superfood.
So
it's their only food, but it's also a superfood.
Yeah, D&D player will find this pretty familiar. Some of it, there's just a couple things that are more streamlined or easier to use. Feel like this game plays a little bit faster. A good dungeon master can make D&D move pretty quickly. Just as written, this one plays faster. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It might be just the theme, because I kind of like Transformers, kind of.
You should have seen him when he was like, okay, this is the story. Optimus Prime was once the...
I gave him all this lore. Our other friend was like, because I don't think he was expecting a full narrative.
I loved it. What would a hardcore D&D player not like about this?
If you're not into the robots, if you don't want the sci-fi, if you don't like the modern stuff, you probably won't enjoy this. But as far as just mechanically, this, I think, is a better system. And nothing against D&D, because I do like Dungeons and Dragons. It's just, I feel like this one's better. It plays a little bit quicker. It's just, in general, takes out some little things.
Yeah. I did like having characters, especially if you're playing with a group that knows Transformers, even casually. You meet, like, oh, that's Soundwave. It's like, oh, it's a celebrity. That's Soundwave. He's here. I don't know why I sounded like Mickey Mouse just then. We all know who that is. Whereas D&D, it's like, oh, there's a whatever. Okay, we all know what a bugbear is. In this one, it's like, no, it's that character. It's that guy. Instantly, I know, like, this guy's dangerous.
Yeah, you have an image in your head.
Yeah, and, like, he's a named character. He's in the Generation 1 cartoon. He's probably got really high stats. Let's step away from this person right now. I know D&D has named characters too, right? And of course, if your group made up their own lore and had named characters and famous people in their group. So what does this come with?
This is the book, and you get the book and all the pages that are in the book.
All the words, all the pictures,
all the words.
There's a little bookmark.
There's a bookmark on the
full
bottom.
color.
The pictures are great. You know, the full Hasbro suite when you get the license. You get all the awesome pictures from the comics. There's a size chart for you. There's one from one of the comics.
But you don't get anything else. You don't get printouts of the...
No, but they're free. You can get them off the Renegade website. You can download a editable PDF.
Okay.
And you can just print it out blank and fill it out. In the back, there's all the characters and their stats. There's good old Megs. You can buy a set of Transformers role-playing dice. I did go ahead and get that. That came with the D2 coin, which you guys just played with quarters. The highest number, the crit sign, is an Autobot symbol. These are just folders for the role-playing game to keep yourself organized. And there's another picture of Windblade. There's a DM screen we're waiting on and a scenario. There is one scenario, very short scenario. I hope this takes off. I hope they add more scenarios to this. There's some minor editing things they need to do with this. Just fix some little small things. But this is a great system and I love this game.
The way it's designed is you're the Autobots facing the Decepticons. And people you said were asking, are they going to make a Decepticon version? Well, you could do it yourself.
Yes,
if you want to make up some more stuff.
Yeah, it would take a little more rule bending and a creative game master to do that. Why don't they just stomp on humans wherever they go?
Yeah, because they're evil, they don't care. So you've got to deal with that.
Specializations, you get to make those up. Specialize in anything you want. There's modifications to weapons, and there are modifications in here, but there's also, it just tells you if you want to make up one, if you want to have night vision goggles, if you want to have oven mittens of doom, whatever, you can make all that stuff up.
Okay, so definitely 4 thumbs up.
Yeah, if I had
this
another
game?
appendage.
2 thumbs and something else is up
Another
from Kyle.
hand.
Buy the game.
This is made by Renegade Games. Just go on the website. You can download the PDF or you can get the physical copy. The PDFs are free for the character sheets. This is $50, I think. $55. And the PDF, I think, is slightly less. And then the character sheets are free.
Okay.
Dungeons & Dragons is awesome, but I just like this theme better.
Does this sound interesting to you? Maybe you've played this and you want to tell us your story. Which do you like better? Are you new at role-playing games? Why am I asking so many questions?
Are you going to get the My Little Pony role-playing game?
Yes?
What?
If you know anyone who's on the fence about this, share this video and give us a subscribe, will you? Go down there and just tickle that subscribe button and click the bell if you want notifications.
If you have any questions, more questions about this, put them in the comments and we'll try to answer them.
Kyle, hit him with the outro.
Get out of here, you crazy kids! Dude, the bridge collapses down, leaving a large chasm between you and your goal. What do you do?
Well, I'm a half dragon. Can I fly?
No. You could levitate if you have a levitation spell. Oh, wait, that's right. You're a fighter with a crossbow who misses all the time.